They fired me at 8:03 in the morning, and they did it with the kind of coldness you usually reserve for shutting down a machine that has outlived its use. No warning, no real conversation, just a scheduled video call with a man in a silk tie and no soul. One click, one sentence, and 12 years of my life were erased like I had never mattered. And the reason? I would not babysit the CFO's son. That is what they reduced me to, a glorified tech nanny. My name is Rachel Monroe. I am 36 years old, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. For over a decade, I was the lead systems strategist at Orion Tech Dynamics, a company that owed most of its success to the architecture I built. I was not just another employee, I was the spine of their operations. But that morning it became clear. I had never really belonged in their eyes. I was useful, not valued. That Tuesday started like any other. I brewed my coffee, fed my dog Winston, and opened my laptop to check emails before the official 9 o'clock meetings kicked in. Then I saw it, a meeting invite labeled Personnel Review, Urgent. The sender? Clive Rutherford, 57, CFO. Arrogant, efficient, useless in a server room. I clicked join, already suspecting something was off. He was already there, of course, perfectly lit in his office, framed by that smug painting of a sailboat that he probably never sailed. "Rachel," he said without looking directly at the camera, "your services are no longer required." No greeting, no explanation, no build-up. My throat tightened. "Excuse me?" I asked. He leaned back like this was routine. "You refuse to mentor Ethan. That kind of resistance does not reflect our collaborative culture. Now, let me tell you about Ethan. Ethan Rutherford, 23 years old, fresh out of some overpriced MBA program with a minor in LinkedIn motivational quotes. He had been with us for 3 weeks and spent more time adjusting his Bluetooth earbuds than looking at code. His idea of innovation was suggesting we move all internal documentation to PowerPoint, and they wanted me, the woman who wrote the Neural Vault 7 architecture line by line, to train this guy to replace me someday. I had said no, firmly, professionally. But clearly, in Orion Tech's world, saying no to a man in a suit was the same as insubordination. Clive did not bother to ask about my side. He just went on about team dynamics, energy alignment, and how we're going in a new direction. Corporate speak for you said something we did not like. I stared at him through the screen, heart pounding but face calm. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him that without Neural Vault 7, they were nothing more than a startup with a logo and buzzwords. But instead, I just nodded. Quietly, coldly. Understood. He blinked. He did not expect that. They never do when a woman does not cry or beg or argue. He mumbled something about HR sending my paperwork, then clicked out of the meeting like he had just finished deleting a spam email. I sat there for a moment, watching my own reflection in the black screen. Then I closed the laptop. No tears, no panic, just a sharp, almost bitter smile. Because they thought they had taken everything from me. They thought firing me meant I was out of the game. What they did not know, what Clive and Ethan and the rest of that boys' club never bothered to ask, was who actually owned Neural Vault 7. They had never read the fine print, never asked where the licensing rights were filed, and they definitely had no clue about the extra security layer I had written, the one I never told anyone about. I called it Omega Lock. It was still dormant, but it would not be for long. I started packing my things, my nameplate, my notebooks, the framed photo of my sister Lily. I reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out the small silver key. It unlocked a compartment under the desk, one they had forgotten existed. Inside was a single red USB drive. Matte finish, no label. It had been sitting there for 3 years, untouched, waiting. My heart beat faster as I slipped it into my bag. I looked around the office one last time. They had no idea what was coming. They thought they had won, but they had just made the most expensive mistake in Orion Tech's history. I was not done, not by a long shot. There is a certain numbness that takes over your body when your career is cut short in the span of a 2-minute meeting. As I walked back to my office, the fluorescent hallway lights above felt colder than usual. Every step echoed like a countdown. I passed by the wall of fake awards and leadership plaques, the kind that companies print up in bulk to make themselves feel important. I had walked this hallway for 12 years. I had given them everything, my nights, my weekends, my peace of mind. And now I was supposed to box up my life and leave, like it meant nothing. I stepped into my office and shut the door behind me. The silence wrapped around me like a heavy coat. My nameplate still sat on the desk, and the chair was still warm from the morning. I stared at my bookshelves for a long moment before grabbing the company-issued cardboard box sitting under the printer table. They always kept those boxes nearby, like they were expecting to need them, like everyone was disposable by design. I started with the easy stuff: my water bottle, my photos, the stack of notebooks with sketches, formulas, and rough drafts of systems that never saw the light of day. Then I knelt down and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. That was where the real story began. Inside was a smaller drawer, locked and hidden, secured with a tiny metal key I always kept in my wallet. It was not company property. I had built the compartment myself back in the early days, when I realized I was the only person in the entire engineering department who understood the long-term architecture of Neural Vault 7. I turned the key slowly, my hands calm, but my thoughts racing. The drawer creaked open, and there it was, a single metallic red USB drive. It looked ordinary, smooth finish, no markings, but it was far from ordinary. That drive held encrypted configuration files, system logs, and something else. Something no one else at Orion Tech even knew existed. A dormant line of custom code called Omega Lock. I had written it in pieces, carefully embedded over time into the neural mapping algorithms. Omega Lock was not just a failsafe. It was a boundary, a wall, a final integrity layer that activated only when the core system detected a critical violation of control. If someone tried to manipulate the architecture without my biometric signature, it would trigger a security shutdown that no one outside of me could reverse. It was never logged in any documentation. I had written it offline, coded it from scratch, and never once mentioned it in any internal communications. It was invisible to everyone but me. I created Omega Lock in secret for one reason. I never trusted the people in power at Orion Tech. Not fully. They were too greedy, too eager to put their names on other people's work, too quick to sacrifice engineers for politics and perception. So I gave them exactly what they wanted on the surface, while keeping the real authority in my hands. It was not revenge. Not at first. It was protection. But now, after what Clive had done to me, after that smug smile and his complete disregard for my years of work, it felt like justice, quiet, simple, and absolutely legal. I stared at the USB drive in my palm. For a second, I thought about leaving it behind, but that passed quickly. I slipped it into the pocket of my coat, zipped it up, and shut the drawer. If they were going to erase me from their company like I never mattered, then they were going to learn what happened when you fired the one person who actually held the keys to your empire. I looked around my office one last time. The bookshelves, the certificates, the computer tower still humming softly under the desk. It all felt hollow now. They thought I would walk away with my head down. They thought I would move on quietly. I walked to the elevator with my box of things. No one made eye contact. A few people glanced up and then quickly looked away. That was the thing about corporate culture. People only love you while you are useful. The second you stop serving their goals, you disappear. As I waited for the elevator to reach the lobby, I rested my hand on the pocket with the USB drive. It felt warm, almost alive. That little piece of metal was more than a backup plan. It was a statement. I had not lost. They had just triggered the part of me that never let go, and they were about to find out what happens when you betray the wrong woman in tech. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window of my apartment, listening to the hum of the city outside. My phone was silent. No missed calls, no messages from anyone at Orion Tech. It was like I had vanished, and that was exactly how they wanted it. I took a slow sip and leaned back, watching the skyline flicker. I had been fired, disrespected, and discarded, but I was not finished, not even close. Because long before they ever hired me, I had made a decision that would change everything. And now, it was finally time to use it. I reached for the dark green binder I kept hidden at the back of my closet. It was not labeled. No logos, no company markings, just a small sticker with a single word written in black ink: ownership. I had put it together nearly 7 years ago, when I first realized that Neural Vault 7 was becoming something bigger than just a company project. Back then, I saw the warning signs. Leadership was already shifting. Promises were being broken. They talked about loyalty, but what they really wanted was control. I was not going to let them take what I had built. Not without a fight. Inside the binder was a legal file I had not touched in years. I flipped it open and smiled to myself. The first page was the official registration of Astria Systems LLC, a small consulting firm based out of Spokane, Washington. The paperwork was clean, professionally done, and listed as the owner and primary innovator of the Vault framework was not Orion Tech. No, it was Astria. Under the section for legal signatories, the name Delilah Monroe was printed in neat black type. My aunt, 63 years old, retired, and one of the smartest women I know. She had helped me set it up. I had trusted her with the paperwork, and she had trusted me with the vision. I turned the page and found the licensing agreement. 5 years, non-exclusive, limited to internal use, renewal pending review. Orion Tech had signed it when they first pitched funding for Vault 7. At the time, they were desperate to land a government cybersecurity contract, and they needed something that looked impressive on paper. Vault 7 gave them that edge, but they never asked questions about where it came from. They assumed I had assigned the rights to the company. I never corrected them. And they never read closely enough to see that the license was tied to employment status, specifically mine. Clause 7C. I ran my finger across the line that had been printed in bold. All rights to Neural Vault 7 revert to Astria Systems LLC upon termination of licensee's active engagement with Orion Tech Dynamics. That meant the moment Clive fired me, their access to the system ended. Legally, permanently. No backdoors, no loopholes. I had not broken any rules. They just never imagined that someone like me would be smart enough to protect herself in advance. That was their mistake. I stared at the contract for a long time. My heart was not racing. I was not angry. What I felt was something sharper, cleaner, satisfaction. They had treated me like I was nothing, a technician, a disposable asset. But they had been building their company on something they never actually owned. And now, without me, they had no right to use it. No demos, no updates, no deployments. The entire foundation of their platform was now locked behind a wall they could not legally or technically bypass. I closed the binder and placed it on the table next to the wine glass. I picked up my phone and looked at the news. Nothing had broken yet. The press still believed Orion Tech was preparing for a major product launch. The investors were still expecting a showcase. I knew better. Without my credentials, the next phase of Vault 7 could not run. Omega Lock would trigger a fail state if they even tried. And if they went ahead without resolving the contract terms, they would be in violation of intellectual property law. In other words, they were stuck. I leaned back again and smiled to myself. Quiet, controlled, and completely within my rights. They thought they had taken something from me. But they had only set a trap for themselves. They wanted to erase me. Instead, they erased their own future. And all I had to do was wait. Because the real storm was not coming from outside. It was coming from the very core of the system they thought they controlled. And I was still the only one who held the real key. 2 days after they fired me, I was sitting in my apartment with a cup of coffee, scrolling through my newsfeed when I saw the headline. Orion Tech was live streaming a product demo for Greenridge Capital. That was the investor group they had been courting for months. This was supposed to be their big moment, their launch, their proof that Neural Vault 7 was ready for global deployment. I sat back on the couch, raised an eyebrow, and turned up the volume. I had not planned on watching, but sometimes the universe delivers entertainment right on schedule. The livestream began with Clive standing on stage in a gray suit that looked too expensive for his level of talent. He smiled for the cameras and started rambling about innovation, agility, and the future of secure infrastructure. The audience looked mildly interested. Maybe 30 or 40 people sat in the front row, most of them wearing badges, holding tablets, nodding politely. Then Clive introduced the system. We are proud to present Neural Vault 7, a groundbreaking framework developed right here at Orion Tech. I laughed out loud. Right there? Interesting choice of words, Clive. They dimmed the lights. The screen behind him lit up, and for a moment, it looked like everything was going to work. The startup sequence ran, the main dashboard appeared, and I recognized the familiar code pattern I had built. Then it happened. The screen froze. For a solid 10 seconds, nothing moved. Then a black pop-up box appeared. White text in the middle. Omega Lock engaged. Biometric authorization required from registered architect. The camera angle shifted. Clive looked confused. The room went quiet. Then Ethan Rutherford himself, stood up from the front row. He adjusted his tie, walked over to the control panel like he had trained for this moment, and began pressing keys. I watched him type a few commands, probably trying to bypass the lock. The screen blinked once, then the entire system shut down. Just like that. Black screen. Cursor frozen. Nothing. A murmur rose from the crowd. Clive whispered something to Ethan, who then tried again. This time he launched into some kind of emergency protocol, probably copied from an internal manual he barely understood. The system restarted, the logo flickered on, and for a brief second it looked like the system might reboot. Then it failed again. A red screen flashed. Error logs filled the background. Authentication failure. System override attempt detected. Execution terminated. The presentation feed cut out. I sat there with my coffee, stunned and a little delighted. I had not expected Omega Lock to trigger so dramatically, but that was the point. It was designed to look like a crash, to panic the untrained, to ensure no one could fake their way through a launch they did not own. Within minutes, social media exploded. Viewers started clipping the broadcast and reposting the footage. One video showed Ethan standing frozen next to the console, mouth open, face pale. Someone added dramatic music and posted it with the hashtag #EthanShutdown. I nearly spit out my coffee. I kept scrolling. More memes popped up. One had a screenshot of the red error screen with the caption, "When your dad buys you a startup and forgets the password." Another one showed Clive pointing to the screen with a caption that read, "Innovation.exe has stopped working." I saw clips being shared by tech influencers, investors, even a couple of my old coworkers who clearly had no idea I was watching. In under an hour, Orion Tech's name was trending, and not in a good way. I leaned back on the couch, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. They had underestimated me so badly. They thought they could delete me from the picture, present my work as their own, and walk away with millions. What they did not realize was that Neural Vault 7 was not just code. It was mine, down to the last detail. And I had written it with a spine, with conditions, with consequences. Watching Clive and Ethan scramble was not revenge. It was a reminder that people like me, quiet builders, overlooked engineers, the ones who stay late and work through weekends, are the ones holding the system together. And when you try to cut us out, the whole thing collapses. Live in front of your most important audience at the worst possible time. By the time the demo disaster had gone viral, I knew it was only a matter of time before Orion Tech tried something desperate. Clive was not the type to accept defeat quietly. That man had built his whole career on the illusion of control, and losing face in front of Greenridge Capital had to feel like a public execution. I knew the moment they realized they could not access Neural Vault 7, they would stop pretending to play fair. So when the first strange activity showed up in my network logs, I was not surprised. I had been waiting for it. It started subtly. A ping here, a strange packet there. At first I thought maybe it was just noise from the usual digital clutter. But then the port scans began. Multiple IP addresses hitting my firewall in regular intervals, probing for vulnerabilities. Then came the phishing emails. Poorly written at first, then oddly specific. One message even included a fake invoice from a real hardware vendor I had used months earlier. That was when I knew this was not random. This was targeted. This was Clive, reaching for whatever tools he had left. They had hired a red team, probably some overpriced third-party cybersecurity firm that promised discreet penetration testing and aggressive recovery solutions. I had seen their kind before. They were good, sometimes even brilliant. But they all had one weakness. They underestimated the person on the other end. They believed in systems and statistics, not in the personal, quiet fury of someone who had been betrayed. They came into this thinking I was just another fired employee trying to protect her pride. They had no idea I had been preparing for this exact scenario for years. You see, I never trusted Orion Tech to do the right thing. Not when money and power were on the line. So, while I was building Neural Vault 7, I created something else on the side, a mirrored version of the live system. I hit it on a subdomain with just enough metadata to make it look real. It was not listed in any directories, but to a skilled attacker, it would appear as a golden opportunity, a vulnerable backup that bypassed Omega Lock. I wanted them to find it. I wanted them to take the bait. And they did. They accessed the subdomain late on a Friday night. I watched the logs in real time as they probed the file structure, bypassed the fake encryption, and executed a shell script I had planted there. The script was designed to look like a simple diagnostic tool, but once it ran, it did 3 things. First, it logged every keystroke and connection ID from their tools. Second, it initiated a credential wipe that invalidated all system-level certificates tied to OrionTech's existing infrastructure. And finally, it triggered a full quarantine protocol across the main deployment nodes, locking them down for 72 hours. I called it Protocol Zero Sky. It was a digital scorched earth strategy. The name came from a night I once spent staring at the ceiling, wondering what I would do if the company ever turned on me. That night, I wrote the first lines of code while drinking cold coffee and listening to the rain. It was not built out of paranoia. It was built out of survival. And now it was working exactly as planned. The red team must have realized something was wrong within minutes. The system started locking down node by node. Their tools were being blocked, their access revoked. By the time they tried to reverse the damage, the script had already propagated across the cloud mirrors. There was nothing left for them to touch. They had not just failed to break into Vault 7, they had triggered a full lockdown that crippled the platform for 3 full business days. Every alert, every blocked command, every logged failure was time-stamped and archived, legally, silently, cleanly. As I watched the system enter quarantine mode, I did not smile. I did not cheer. What I felt was colder than that. I felt justified. This was not about revenge. This was about boundaries, about showing them that you do not get to rewrite history just because you hold a higher title. Clive had tried to erase me. He had tried to steal what I built. Now he would have to explain to investors, to partners, to his board, why the system his company depended on had gone dark, and why the only person who could bring it back was no longer taking their calls. That weekend, my phone buzzed with a message that stopped me in my tracks. It was not from anyone I expected. The name on the screen read, Miranda Shaw, age 42, managing partner at Ethereum Group. They were one of OrionTech's earliest backers, serious money, old-school influence, and the kind of people you only heard about in investor meetings. She said she had watched the demo collapse live, but more importantly, she had dug through the back-end logs after the failure and seen something others had missed. My name, embedded in the original deployment signature, not Clive's, not OrionTech's, mine. She wanted to talk. I was skeptical at first. It is not every day someone like Miranda reaches out to someone like me, especially not after a viral tech disaster. But there was something honest in her message. Direct, no fluff. She said, "I know you built it. I think it is time we talk about what comes next." I replied with a simple yes, and we set the meeting for Sunday afternoon at a quiet cafe in downtown San Diego. It was one of those places where every cup of coffee costs more than a cheap bottle of wine, but the chairs were soft and the Wi-Fi was fast. I got there early. I always do. I ordered black coffee and sat by the window, watching people pass by in sunglasses and Sunday clothes. Then she walked in. Miranda Shaw, exactly as sharp and elegant as you would imagine someone who moves millions with a single call. She was dressed in navy blue, not a wrinkle in sight, and she carried herself like someone who had seen every kind of bluff and betrayal there was. But when she sat down across from me, she smiled. Not the fake kind. The kind that says, "You are not invisible. I see what you did." We talked for almost an hour. She did not waste time with pleasantries. She asked about the system, the structure, the real story behind Neural Vault 7. And I told her. I told her about how I built it alone at first, how I stayed up until sunrise fixing bugs no one else could understand, how OrionTech wanted the product without the person who created it. She listened without interrupting, nodding now and then, asking sharp questions that told me she had done her homework. Then she leaned in and said, "Rachel, I do not just want to buy access. I want to rebuild it, with you." At first, I thought I misheard her. "Rebuild it?" I asked. She nodded and said, "Yes, but not under OrionTech, not under Ethereum, under something new. something with your name on it. And just like that, she pitched the idea of a partnership, a new entity, a clean slate. She wanted to invest in what Vault 7 could be, not just the code, but the vision. She proposed launching a new company around the architecture, one where I would not just build the system, but own it, full creative control, no board politics, no fake credit. She called it Monroe Logic. I did not come up with the name, she did. But the second she said it, something clicked. It was clean, sharp, personal. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself feel something close to hope. I asked her, "Why me?" Her answer was simple. "Because I watched what you did. You did not break their system. You protected yours. That tells me you are not just brilliant, you have integrity. That is rarer than any line of code." We finalized the terms over the next few days. Miranda would fund the initial launch, provide legal infrastructure, and handle investor relations. I would lead the technical side, hire my own team, and shape the future of the system from the inside out. For once, I would not be an employee fighting for credit. I would be a creator with a seat at the table. And this time, I would make sure no one could take that away from me. When I left the cafe that day, the sky was bright and warm, and the breeze off the bay felt like a quiet exhale. Everything had fallen apart. But somehow, I was still standing. I was not going back to Orion Tech. I was building something better, and the next chapter would start with my name on the door. When Miranda and I began outlining the formal structure of Monroe Logic, everything seemed to fall into place with almost eerie ease. The business plan, the legal framework, the initial funding round, all of it came together in under 10 days. But there was one thing I had not mentioned yet. One thing that mattered more to me than equity, title, or even the final product itself. It was personal, and it was non-negotiable. If I was going to take this leap, it had to be on my terms. And that meant protecting someone who could not protect herself. My younger sister, Lily, is 28 now. 3 years ago, she was hit by a drunk driver while biking home from work, traumatic brain injury. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive, but they never said the road ahead would be anything like recovery. Lily's brain still works, but not like it used to. She forgets names, struggles with movement, and has sudden panic attacks triggered by sound. She lives with our aunt now, in a quiet suburb with round-the-clock care. Insurance barely covers the basics. Every month is a financial balancing act. And no matter what I achieved in my career, part of me always carried the weight of her injury, like I owed her the kind of future she never got. So, when Miranda sent over the first draft of the contract, I read through it slowly, carefully. I looked at every clause, every bullet point. I saw my name in places it had never been before. Chief architect, co-founder, majority stakeholder. It should have felt like victory. But I knew I could not sign it. Not yet. So I called her. Not her assistant, not her attorney. Miranda directly. "Before I sign," I said, "there's one condition." She paused. "Go ahead. I want a dedicated fund," I told her. "Neuro rehab care for my sister. Her name is Lily. She needs long-term treatment that insurance does not touch. I want it written in, clear, permanent, and not performance-based. No loopholes, no negotiations. You agree or this deal does not happen." There was silence on the other end, for maybe 5 seconds. Then Miranda said something I will never forget. "Done," she replied. No questions, no hesitation. Just that one word. Done. I was stunned. I expected a pause, a counteroffer, maybe even a corporate deflection. But instead, she simply accepted it. She even followed up with her legal team personally that night and had them draft a new clause. It was not just a line in the contract. It was its own section. A fully funded, irrevocable care trust. Enough to pay for Lily's therapy, equipment, and personal support staff for the next 20 years. Indexed for inflation. Protected from bankruptcy. My hands trembled when I read it. I did not cry, but I felt something close to relief. That was the moment I knew I had made the right call. Miranda was not just backing the code. I think she was backing the person. And more than that, she understood that real loyalty is not built with stock options. It is built with action. Quiet, meaningful action that no one applauds but everyone remembers. She never brought it up again, never used it as leverage. She just honored it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. In the days that followed, The paperwork moved fast. I signed on as technical co-founder of Monroe Logic, with full authority over architecture, deployment, and infrastructure security. The company was mine as much as it was hers. And with the neuro rehab fund in place, I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. For the first time since Lily's accident, I could breathe without guilt shadowing every breath. When I visited Lily later that week, I did not explain all the details. She does not always process complex information the same way anymore, but I told her she would be okay, that we were going to get her the best care, the best tools, the best chance. She smiled. Just a little. That was enough. This was not just a comeback story, it was a foundation, not built on revenge, built on love, resilience, and the quiet clause no one saw coming, the deal breaker that made the deal real. When the paperwork was finalized and Monroe Logic officially launched, I was offered the role of Chief Innovation Officer. That title, while impressive, was not what truly mattered to me. What mattered was the control, full control. I was finally in charge of the direction, the evolution, and the core architecture of Neural Vault 7. No more filters, no more interference from clueless middle managers or legacy board members with outdated tech opinions. No more being overruled in meetings because someone's golfing buddy wanted his son to learn the ropes as a product lead. That era was done. This time, I was the architect and the gatekeeper. I could hire who I wanted, build what I believed in, and move at the speed innovation demanded. I decided early on that I was not going to recreate the bureaucratic nightmare of Orion Tech. I was going to build lean, focused, and sharp, quality over headcount, purpose over politics. So I reached out to the people I trusted most, not the ones with flashy resumes, but the ones who had proven themselves in pressure, in silence, and sometimes in the thankless trenches that no one saw. To my surprise, several of them had already reached out to me. Quiet messages on LinkedIn, encrypted emails, even one handwritten note mailed to my aunt's house. "We believed in your leadership," one of them wrote. "We always did." These were not just colleagues. They were survivors, people who had spent years pushing brilliance through red tape, people who had watched Orion Tech slowly rot from the inside while pretending everything was fine on the surface. I knew who to call. I knew who was ready. Within 2 weeks, I had assembled a founding team of 12. 7 were ex-Orion Tech engineers. The others were people I had met over the years, hackathon winners, freelance geniuses, underpaid researchers, and one fierce QA analyst who had once found 47 bugs in a single sprint review and still brought cupcakes the next day. They were not just hires, they were my people, and they were hungry. Not for revenge, but for real work, for something meaningful. We set up shop in a co-working loft in downtown San Diego. Nothing fancy, just fiber internet, whiteboards, and strong coffee. But what we lacked in decor, we made up for in momentum. We redesigned Neural Vault 7 from the kernel up, stripped out the bloat, optimized the AI decision layer, and we finally deployed the Omega Lock protocol as a core feature, under my direct supervision. Not a failsafe this time, but a fully documented adaptive security shell. We called it Omega Prime. Every line of code that went into the new system was peer-reviewed, tested under pressure, and signed off by me. No exceptions. And for the first time in my career, I was not fighting upstream. I was building in flow. Even Miranda respected the boundary. She checked in weekly, but never hovered, never pushed. She trusted the vision. She trusted me. And that gave me the space to make Neural Vault 7 not just functional again, but revolutionary. We focused on the users we knew best, enterprise clients dealing with sensitive neural data and AI-powered prediction modeling. But we also opened it up to new use cases, secure health analytics, cognitive enhancement systems, even adaptive educational platforms. Our system could read user intent and adjust its data pathways accordingly, reducing cognitive fatigue and increasing output accuracy. And every improvement came from our small team, working fast, failing fast, and recovering even faster. It was the kind of environment I had dreamed of for years, the kind where creativity was not just allowed, it was expected, where we did not have to explain why we were working late or justify spending 2 days debugging a single line. We just did it, because we cared, and every version that went out felt like a personal victory. No chains, no suits, no second guessing from the top floor. I remember standing in that loft one night long after the others had gone home. The servers were humming, the city lights reflecting off the glass, and I just stood there for a moment, taking it in. This was mine now. Not in the ego sense, in the earned sense. I had clawed my way back, step by step, with nothing but my skills, my instincts, and the people who believed in me. This was full control. And for the first time, I was not afraid of it. I was ready. The downfall came faster than anyone expected. Within just 3 weeks, Orion Tech's stock dropped by 46%. It was not a slow decline either. It was a free fall. One after another, key investors pulled out, dumping their shares before things got worse. The moment Neural Vault 7 failed in front of Greenridge Capital, it sent shockwaves through the tech industry. Everyone who had once spoken about Orion Tech as the next unicorn suddenly stopped returning their calls. Quietly and then loudly, the world moved on. What they had once sold as their crown jewel had turned into their public embarrassment. Clive Redmond, the ever-arrogant CEO who once told me to stay in my lane, was forced to resign. The board met behind closed doors and unanimously voted for his exit. There was no grand announcement, just a short press release filled with meaningless phrases like strategic transition and future realignment. No one believed it. Everyone knew he had bet the company's future on a system they did not own and could not control, and the gamble had failed in the most public way possible. His golden parachute was shredded by shareholder pressure before he could even grab his leather briefcase. As for Ethan Rutherford, the chief technology officer, things went downhill even faster. The clip of him flailing on stage during the Neural Vault 7 crash went viral overnight. Someone added dramatic music and a giant "Error 404 Competence Not Found" banner across the screen. It blew up on TikTok, racking up over 10 million views in a matter of days. He tried to defend himself at first, tweeting that it was a minor technical glitch. But the internet was not forgiving. Within 48 hours, Ethan deleted every one of his social media accounts. His LinkedIn quietly changed status to open to work. No one was surprised. Orion Tech tried to regroup. They announced an internal task force to rebuild core architecture and stabilize enterprise deployments. But behind the scenes, they were scrambling to stitch together whatever legacy tools they could find to replace Neural Vault 7, old systems that had not been updated in years, open source frameworks duct taped into place. I heard from a few people still inside that it was chaos. Entire teams were burning out, just trying to keep one client dashboard from crashing. And while they were patching holes, something much bigger was happening in the background. Their contracts, government, corporate, institutional, were slipping through their fingers. One by one, clients reached out to Monroe Logic. Some were polite, some were desperate. "We want stability," they said. "We need innovation with reliability." The irony was almost too sweet. The same clients that Clive used to brag about in interviews were now signing onboarding documents with us. I kept every one of those emails. Not to gloat, but to remind myself how fast power shifts when you build something real. By week 4, we had secured 6 of Orion Tech's top-tier clients. We were onboarding faster than we had planned for, but my team handled it with precision. They understood the system inside and out, because many of them had helped build it the first time. Now, they were building it again, but better. Cleaner code, tighter security, more modular design. Every success felt personal. And every time we hit a new milestone, I would glance at the news headlines about Orion Tech's collapse and feel a strange mixture of satisfaction and calm. Reporters started calling it the Neural Vault disaster. Business blogs dissected every mistake, from leasing instead of owning the IP, to over-relying on executives who never touched a line of code, to dismissing the original architect, me, as replaceable. One article titled, "How Ego Sank Orion Tech," got shared across tech forums like wildfire. I did not comment publicly. I did not need to. The numbers spoke for themselves. Monroe Logic was rising, and Orion Tech was dissolving piece by piece. There were rumors that Orion Tech might be acquired. Some said a private equity firm was circling, planning to gut it and sell off the remaining assets. Others thought they might file for bankruptcy before the end of the quarter. I honestly did not care either way. They had made their choices. They had tried to erase me, and instead, they erased themselves. Their fall was not dramatic. It was cold, clinical, and deserved. All I did was protect what was mine. And the best part? I did not have to lift a finger. I did not hack them. I did not leak anything. I just stood back and watched them collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. That is the thing about building something truly valuable. It remembers who gave it life. And when that life is taken for granted, it knows exactly when to shut itself down. Now, I sit in my new glass-walled office overlooking the San Diego Bay. It is quiet here in the mornings, just the hum of early traffic below and the sunlight glinting off the water. Sometimes I catch myself staring out at the horizon longer than I mean to, thinking about how far things have come. I keep the metallic red USB drive, yes, the same one that once held the kill switch, on a brushed steel stand on my desk. Next to it, a simple black plaque with silver letters that reads, "Respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned." People notice it when they walk in. I do not explain it. My name is on the door now. Chief Innovation Officer, Monroe Logic. That still makes me pause when I see it printed on formal letters, etched into the building's directory, or mentioned in press releases. It is not the title that matters. It is what it represents. I have full control over my work, my vision, my voice. I do not have to chase approval from boardroom politicians or dodge credit-stealing executives. If I greenlight something, it moves. If I say no, it stops. There are no chains here, no whispers behind my back. Just clarity. My team? Hand-picked. Not just talented, but loyal, focused, and honest. Many of them came from Orion Tech, people who had messaged me quietly after I was fired. They had seen what happened and recognized it for what it was. Some of them had been ignored too, or pushed out by the same toxic leadership. Now, they thrive. We operate lean, sharp, and efficient. Meetings are direct, code reviews are tight, and every product we push out feels like a small revolution. We do not just ship features. We solve problems no one else dares to touch. Every now and then, I get an email from someone I used to work with at Orion Tech. Some are apologies, some are congratulations. A few are thinly veiled attempts to come work for me. I read them all. I respond to most. But I do not forget. Not because I hold grudges. I just remember patterns. People show you who they are when the stakes are high. And during those last weeks at Orion Tech, a lot of people showed me everything I needed to know. That clarity has become my compass. There is a freedom in no longer needing to prove yourself to people who refuse to see you. Being underestimated for so long taught me how to move in silence, how to outmaneuver without warning, how to win without shouting. I learned how to build systems that spoke louder than I ever could in a meeting room. And when they fired me, they handed me the final piece I needed. Distance, space to rebuild, to refine, to relaunch without their interference. That firing was not the end. It was the start of everything. We just signed 3 new clients last week, global ones. Monroe Logic is now being discussed in the same breath as companies 5 times our size. But we do not let that distract us. I remind my team often, keep building, keep improving. Let results speak louder than the noise. We do not need press stunts. We do not need fancy galas. Our wins are visible in uptime, in speed, in secure frameworks that do not crumble under pressure. That is our language. That is our legacy. At the end of every week, I close my laptop, lean back in my chair, and glance at that USB drive. It is not just a symbol of revenge. It is a reminder of value, of ownership, of what happens when someone thinks they can take your creation and make it theirs. They never could, and they never will. Because systems, real systems, carry the fingerprints of their maker in every line of code. Orion Tech thought they could erase me. But now, the industry knows. You cannot erase the foundation. So here I am, my office, my rules. Not out of arrogance, but out of hard-earned clarity. I built what they thought they could steal. I protected what they tried to sabotage. And I grew stronger where they wanted me broken. Sometimes, success does not look like applause. It looks like peace. It sounds like silence in a room you own. And it feels like knowing you never have to prove your worth again.